healthcare, education, think about transforming sectors that matter, think about the delivery of public services by governments to their citizens. All of these are areas that can be transformed by this technology.
But when the World Bank hosted its Global Digital Summit 2025 back in March, the message was loud and clear. The world isn't just talking about digital transformation anymore, it's building it. The theme, Digital Pathways for All, was more than just another glossy catchphrase. It signaled the World Bank's determination to accelerate digital public infrastructure, DPI, worldwide, ensuring that payments, IDs, data, and cross-border connectivity become as basic and universal as electricity and clean water. Now, here's where it gets interesting for us. Buried inside those speeches and policy panels was a repeated emphasis on digital payments and cross-border interoperability. The World Bank acknowledged what millions of migrant workers, small businesses, and even governments have been saying for years. Moving money across borders is too slow, too expensive, and far too exclusionary. That reality is the exact space where XRP, Stellar, and HBR have been quietly building, waiting for global institutions to finally catch up. And now, in 2025, we're watching the pieces start to align. Think about it. The World Bank is pushing DPI, and one of its top priorities is payment rails that can scale across borders. That's not a coincidence. It's an acknowledgement that the current financial plumbing simply doesn't work for the 21st century. SWIFT is outdated. Correspondent banking is slow and fractured. The IMF itself, in multiple reports over the past 3 years, has admitted that CBDCs and private blockchain rails may be the only way forward. So, what's happening right now is this global convergence. You've got the World Bank setting the policy framework, the IMF nudging central banks towards CBDCs, and then you've got actual projects like Stellar, XLM, XRP Ledger, and Hedera HBAR that are technologically ready to plug in. Let's take Stellar first. Stellar has always branded itself as the blockchain for the unbanked, for remittances, for low-cost cross-border payments. At the summit, there was constant talk about financial inclusion. How do you make sure the 2.6 billion people currently offline or underserved can participate in the digital economy? Stellar has already been doing that in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia through its anchor model and partnerships like MoneyGram Access. So when the World Bank says we need digital pathways for all, Stellar can literally raise its hand and say, we've been building those pathways for a decade. Now XRP. This is where the conversation shifts from retail and remittances to wholesale and infrastructure level change. The Ripple team has been laser-focused on building CBDC interoperability solutions, literally pitching themselves as the bridge between sovereign digital currencies. When the World Bank and IMF talk about the nightmare scenario of fragmented CBDCs that don't talk to each other, XRP is the antidote. It's the neutral bridge asset, the settlement layer that can move value across borders instantly. With Ripple now past most of its legal hurdles in the US, 2025 has turned into the year where it's no longer can they, but when will they? And then you have HBAR. At first glance, Hedera doesn't fit the same mold as Stellar or XRP. It's not a payments-first blockchain. But here's the kicker. The World Bank Summit wasn't just about money movement. It was about governance, trust, and public-private partnerships. Hedera's entire model is governance at scale, with its governing council that includes some of the biggest enterprises and institutions in the world. When the World Bank talks about trusted digital infrastructure and open collaboration between public and private actors, it's basically describing Hedera's DNA. HBAR might not be the remittance coin, but it could be the trust layer that makes the World Bank's DPI vision credible. So now imagine the three of them together. Stellar for low-value cross-border inclusion, XRP for high-value institutional CBDC bridging, HBAR for governance and secure enterprise-grade infrastructure. That's not science fiction. That's literally the toolkit the World Bank says we need right now. Let's pause and think about the symbolism here. For years, crypto projects were dismissed as speculative sideshows. The World Bank, IMF, and BIS barely acknowledged them except to issue warnings. But the 2025 summit flipped that tone. Now, these same institutions are echoing the language and solutions that Stellar, Ripple, and Hedera have been building for years. And if you listen closely, you realize the gap between policy ambition and technical implementation is exactly where these blockchain networks drive. Here's an example. At the summit, one of the recurring soundbites was the need for real-time cross-border settlements with universal access. That's literally Stellar's mission statement. Another, the importance of interoperability between national systems to avoid fragmentation. That's Ripple's pitch for XRP as the CBDC bridge. And finally, the need for public-private governance models that balance innovation with trust. That's Hedera's entire branding. This isn't to say the World Bank is about to adopt HBAR, XLM, or XRP tomorrow, but it means the ground is shifting. The narrative alignment between what these coins offer and what the world's biggest financial bodies are asking for is now undeniable. And timing matters. In 2025, we're at a crossroads. Central banks are piloting CBDCs in over 130 countries. The IMF is pushing its XC platform for CBDC interoperability. The World Bank is rallying nations around DPI. The private sector is under pressure to deliver the tech backbone. Who's ready? It's not Swift. It's not Visa or MasterCard alone. It's the blockchain networks that have been testing, failing, improving, and shipping solutions in the real world for years. That's why the World Bank Summit feels like a turning point. Not because they announced a stellar partnership or name-dropped Ripple, but because the language, priorities, and urgency of global financial institutions have finally caught up to what these networks were designed to solve. So here's the takeaway for Section 1. The World Bank's Global Digital Summit 2025 crystallized the demand for inclusive, interoperable, trustworthy digital finance systems. Stellar, XRP, and HBAR are no longer fringe players. They're the ones standing at the intersection of policy and technology, ready to turn digital pathways for all from a slogan into a functioning reality. The most concrete example of how blockchain has already solved one of the summit's core priorities: financial inclusion through accessible payments. That example is Stellar's partnership with MoneyGram, a model the World Bank itself could use as a template for global digital public infrastructure. At the summit, multiple panelists emphasized the importance of reducing remittance costs. Right now, the global average cost of sending $200 across borders sits around 6.2%. World Bank Remittance Prices Worldwide Database, Q1 2025. For low-income families, that's a huge tax on survival. Migrant workers in Nigeria, the Philippines, or Mexico shouldn't have to lose a week's worth of groceries just to send money home. This is where Stellar has been proving itself since at least 2022. Through its MoneyGram Access integration, Stellar created a system where users can walk into a physical MoneyGram location in over 200 countries, deposit cash, and instantly receive USDC stablecoins on the Stellar blockchain. Those stablecoins can then be sent across borders in seconds, at a fraction of the traditional fee, and cashed out again in local currency on the other side. It's the perfect bridge between the old world of cash economies and the new world of blockchain finance. Now compare that to what the World Bank is advocating in 2025. Their summit keynote hammered the need for digital pathways that leave no one behind, which means systems that don't just serve the tech-savvy in big cities, but reach farmers, traders, and families in rural towns. That's exactly the role Stellar plays. It's not about flashy speculation. It's about being the connective tissue between fiat and blockchain, between local economies and global rails. And here's the kicker. Stellar's approach aligns almost word for word with the World Bank's DPI framework. Digital ID, open payment rails, and inclusion-first models were emphasized as the three pillars. With Stellar plus MoneyGram, you already see how that works. A verified ID can link to a wallet, the blockchain provides open rails, and the retail access points ensure no one is excluded. This isn't theory, it's deployment. The IMF's recent paper on cross-border payments and CBDC interoperability warned about the risk of central banks building siloed systems that don't interconnect. Stellar's anchor model sidesteps that by creating a network of networks where banks, fintechs, and even central banks can plug in. So, when the World Bank says at the summit that remittance costs must fall to below 3% by 2030, a UN Sustainable Development Goal, Stellar can raise its hand and say, "We're already there. We've been running that model for years." In many ways, Stellar has become the proof of concept that global institutions like the World Bank can point to. It shows that blockchain isn't just hype. It's solving the very problems they've set as top priorities. And it sets the stage for XRP and HBAR to bring similar real-world utility at the wholesale and governance levels. Stellar has already shown us how blockchain can bridge retail users and traditional cash. Then XRP is the heavyweight contender for solving the wholesale CBDC interoperability problem, the exact challenge the IMF and World Bank keep highlighting in their reports and summits. At the 2025 World Bank Digital Summit, one of the recurring themes was the risk of fragmentation. Central banks worldwide are rolling out CBDCs at record speed. The digital yuan in China, e-naira in Nigeria, the digital real in Brazil, and pilot projects across Europe, Asia, and Africa. But here's the issue. Most of these systems are being built in isolation using different architectures, standards, and settlement layers. That's like trying to connect 100 different private internets with no common language. The IMF's Global CBDC Handbook, published in late 2024, warned bluntly, without interoperability, CBDCs could worsen the very problems they were meant to solve. Cross-border payments would remain slow, expensive, and clunky. That's where XRP Ledger and RippleNet step in. Ripple has positioned itself not as a competitor to CBDCs, but as the neutral bridge layer. Their messaging at Davos 2025 echoed this. Ripple isn't trying to issue a central bank's money, it's providing the rails to connect them. Think of XRP as the universal adapter in a world of mismatched plugs. Central banks don't have to trust each other's code bases. They just need a reliable settlement layer in the middle. And institutions are starting to notice. Ripple announced partnerships in 2024 with over a dozen pilot CBDC projects, including work with the Republic of Palau's digital dollar and collaborations in Bhutan and Montenegro. By 2025, Ripple's CBDC platform is being pitched as an interoperability sandbox where central banks can test cross-border flows in a controlled, regulatory-friendly environment. Now connect that back to the World Bank's summit narrative of digital pathways for all. The World Bank doesn't want a fractured global financial system. They want one where money moves across borders as easily as sending an email. XRP aligns with that ambition by offering a solution that isn't tied to one nation's currency or one corporation's ecosystem. It's infrastructure that plugs into everyone's system. What makes XRP especially compelling is speed and cost. Transactions settle in 3 to 5 seconds with fees of fractions of a cent. Compare that with the SWIFT system, where payments can take days and rack up significant fees. Exactly the inefficiency the World Bank wants eliminated by 2030. Critics sometimes argue that central banks won't outsource something as critical as settlement to a private company like Ripple. But Ripple's model isn't about control. It's about providing a neutral layer of liquidity. Banks and governments still issue and manage their CBDCs. XRP just ensures they can all talk to each other. So, in this evolving landscape, XRP isn't just a speculative token. It's a direct response to the World Bank's and IMF's own warnings. If Stellar proved inclusion works at the retail level, XRP proves that the wholesale plumbing of the financial system can be rewired for speed, cost, and trust. If Stellar connects the underserved and XRP builds the bridge between CBDCs, then Hedera Hashgraph, HBAR, provides the governance backbone, the very element the World Bank and IMF insist is non-negotiable for a truly global digital financial system. At the 2025 World Bank Summit, multiple panels raised the same concern. Who governs the rails of the new financial order? Unlike Bitcoin and Ethereum, which rely on decentralized miners and validators, Hedera is built around a governing council model. This council includes giants like Google, IBM, Standard Bank, Boeing, Deutsche Telekom, and Shinhan Bank. These aren't speculative players. They're enterprises and institutions trusted by governments worldwide. For policymakers, that governance structure matters. Why? Because the World Bank and IMF operate in an environment where accountability, compliance, and trust are paramount. When a central bank or public authority thinks about plugging into a blockchain or DLT system, they aren't just thinking about speed or low fees. They're thinking about legal liability, regulatory audits, and institutional credibility. Hedera's council model offers exactly that. A transparent, enterprise-grade structure where the decision-making isn't hidden behind pseudonymous validators, but is carried out by recognizable, accountable institutions. BAR's consensus algorithm, Hashgraph, also makes it a unique player. It delivers near-instant finality, seconds, low energy use, and high throughput. At the World Bank Summit, climate commitments and sustainability were highlighted alongside financial innovation. Hedera's green credentials, backed by its carbon-negative network status, align directly with the World Bank's sustainability mandates for digital finance infrastructure. That makes HBAR not just technologically advanced, but also politically acceptable. In practice, what role does HBAR play in the CBDC conversation? Several. First, as a compliance-ready ledger. Governments and regulators demand transparency and auditability, and Hedera's public yet permission structure allows central banks to maintain oversight without sacrificing efficiency. Second, as a tokenization platform. Hedera already supports real-world asset tokenization, from green bonds to supply chain credits, and the World Bank itself has floated the idea of tokenized climate assets being part of future global markets. Imagine a scenario where CBDCs interact seamlessly with tokenized carbon credits or digital government bonds, all running on or connected through Hedera rails. HBAR also fits neatly into the guardrails narrative that Christine Lagarde, IMF, and Ajay Banga, World Bank, have emphasized. Yes, CBDCs must innovate, but they must also avoid being hijacked by unregulated, high-risk ecosystems. Hedera, with its enterprise council and compliance focus, provides exactly that middle ground, decentralized enough to scale globally, but structured enough to reassure governments. Taken together, Stellar brings inclusion, XRP ensures interoperability, and HBAR provides trust and governance. These three address the World Bank's exact priorities: access, speed, and credibility. And as seen in the 2025 summit, the demand isn't just for pilots anymore, it's for scalable global solutions. HBAR may not grab headlines like XRP or Stellar, but in the boardrooms where CBDC policies are crafted, its model of trusted decentralization could be the deciding factor. So here's the bottom line. What we heard loud and clear at the 2025 World Bank Summit is that the world isn't debating whether CBDCs and digital settlement rails will happen. The debate is how fast and who will provide the trust layer. And that's exactly where XRP, Stellar, and HBAR fit in. XRP has positioned itself as the ultimate bridge asset for cross-border value. Stellar is solving the problem of financial inclusion with real-world remittance use cases, and HBAR is building the institutional governance framework that central banks and regulators demand. Together, they aren't just coins in the market. They're building blocks of a new financial infrastructure that aligns with what the IMF and World Bank are calling for: speed, transparency, compliance, and global reach. Now the question isn't whether these assets will play a role. The question is whether you will be positioned before adoption accelerates. If you see the vision, don't just watch. Stay ahead. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the conversation. Where do you think this means for the future of crypto and finance?